Thank you for stopping by to hear my story. My hope is that my story encourages you. If you are like I was, in love, yet confused, diminished, and trapped, my prayer is that you are encouraged to carefully break out and take back your life, take back your self-worth for your survival. And if you have children, a better life for them. If that is not who you are, I pray you hear my story to recognize and carefully help others who need to know they can rise above abusive oppression and make a better life free of anguish, abuse, and being devalued. I will share my story with you as an effort to lend perspective for the module that discusses the battered woman syndrome and the abuse cycle. 1 out of every 4 women will experience domestic violence. 1 woman is beaten by their partner approximately every 15 seconds in the United States alone. Where it started. I remember the day my knight in shining armor rescued me. I was sitting there on the curb, secretly sobbing behind my sunglasses and curly hair, seemingly helpless and so distressed. 17 years old and on my own, attending community college, working 2 jobs, trying so very hard to make everything work. I had just gotten off a bus that was running late, which made me miss my bus that runs only once every hour. My jobs were important to me, so I was very hurt and disappointed at the thought of being late. Unexpectedly, I heard a voice call out to me. That number 516 just won't do. I looked up, recognized the young man in the car from middle school. He asked if he could give me a ride. Since I remembered who he was, I gladly accepted his remedy for my dilemma. I happily arrived early to work. And so it began, with him swooping me up over puddles of water, showering me with attention and gifts. He was charming and made me feel so sweetly cherished. It was magical and intoxicating love. As this mesmerizing and bonding time went by, how utterly shocked I was when I learned this 19-year-old Prince Charming was already committed to another relationship. I immediately withdrew, but he constantly pursued me. So I took my forlorn heart and disappeared to Houston to gain distance. Next chapter. Bamboozled again. There I was, a naive 19-year-old, married to a 27-year-old preacher who at that time thought it was more important to hide from child support authorities, but maybe not as important to stick to a job. I found myself stuck in the country where it was hard to get anywhere, living most often without heat and sometimes no water, unless we tapped 4 lots over into his parents' well. I was desperate to make a better life for myself and my 2 baby girls. So I moved back to Houston, catching buses back and forth to work and daycare. Trying to make it in Houston seemed so hard at that time. But then through a friend, there he was again, my knight in shining armor, appearing again and saving the day. The girls and I had a house and a car, and we're back in San Antonio with my friends. And my beautiful shining night, our consuming love resumed. Lovely and ever so special did he make me feel. I had never loved anyone so much, nor had I known such love and adoration from anyone else. Perplexity and devastation began creeping in this seemingly melodious love, as he would become irrationally angry at times. Over time, display unjustified jealousy, then began demanding isolation from my friends and family, and then there came first violent actions. These episodes would be followed by his tears, with seemingly sincere apologetics and consolation, sweet times of his love and adoration with special gifts. These sweet times would last for a season, but then, again, and then, again, there I would be, scared, tiptoeing on eggshells. Fast forward. At that point in life, I'd already left for the local Salvation Army once, only to be talked into coming back by him and his mother. Then, there was dealing with the discovery he was doing drugs and had manipulated an affair with someone dear to me. At this time, I had no job. I had a newborn baby, a 1, 5, and 6-year-old. I was drowning in the darkness of depression and helplessness. After one of his drug escapades, I was so scared and barely breathing as I repeatedly snuck past his sleeping head, stuffed the car with clothes, toys, and iron supplies, and then the children. We drove from the dark of the early morning in San Antonio to the dawn of morning in Austin. That day, we got on the waiting list for the Salvation Army. While we waited to hear if we would get a spot, the children played at the park, while I laid in the grass, limp and exhausted, watching them in peace, not sure what the next moment would hold for us, but I was certainly relieved to be away from the source of my deteriorating well-being. After a couple of weeks of looking for a job and volunteering, I met a kind and noble lady who let me help her with her nonprofit, who soon made arrangements for the children and me to live in Georgetown at a house Habitat for Humanity was using for their headquarters in exchange for administrative work for me. Here I was, building my life up, but because I felt guilty for not letting him see the children, I contacted him. And without truly understanding my plight, I allowed it to start all over again. He talked me into taking a 2-day trip with the children in his 18-wheeler cab with living quarters to Muskogee, Oklahoma. Somewhere on that trip, he started showing his true colors again, and I knew worse was to come. So when he went to drop his load, I packed up the children and our belongings, left the hotel, and began with trepid fear a long trek over a long bridge, so scared he would come back before we could make it over. I finally made it over to get to a shopping strip that was in plain view from the hotel. As I made it, I saw his truck. I held myself and the children against a wall, waited for him to enter the hotel, and hurried for my very life to the Pizza Hut across the parking lot. There I called the police for a ride to the battered women's shelter. I moved from the Muskogee shelter to the Tulsa battered women's shelter. While there, I called his mother so she wouldn't be worried, and she began talking to me about returning. During this time, I was also in touch with a phenomenal program called Project Quest that would soon change my life's direction. Through a relative, I was given a house in San Antonio to live in temporarily while I went through the process of applying to Project Quest and getting on my feet. Why I allowed him to live there with us, I still don't understand, but I did. Despite his attempts to sabotage my entrance to Project Quest, through clever moves while he was at work, I not only got into Project Quest, but also secured a townhome through a San Antonio Housing Authority program called Family Self-Sufficiency. I was finally starting to understand and feel with urgency that I needed to end it with him for good. As I was coming to this realization, he tried to suffocate me and left bruises on my face. I thought I was determined to show and tell someone, maybe at the daycare, maybe at the apartment office, but instead I covered up with makeup and clammed up. I am so very, very sad to say that it took him causing harm to my child for me to finally draw the line. It was a scary, volatile situation, but I and the children made it to the San Antonio Battered Women's Shelter and got a restraining order. During this last stint at the Battered Women's Shelter, I truly comprehended that I had the battered woman syndrome and understood the cycle that the upcoming module will explain to you. With my eyes at last wide open, I found myself strengthened to make a better life for myself and my children. I was a typical battered woman who left multiple times, only to return again and again. I am so very blessed that I didn't end up a homicide statistic. It took me years to rebuild my understanding of my self-worth, and I am still careful to realize and protect myself from the tendencies that have attracted a lifetime of abuse in my journey. My children are thriving successfully, and I am a business owner who works hard building life up for others in my community. It wasn't with the wave of a magic wand. I've had an uphill battle with many challenges, but I wouldn't trade the great peace in my heart and mind I have now for any relationship. I now know I am a valued daughter of the King who has worth to offer the world, and I should never let anyone diminish who I am. If you identify with my story, you too can plan carefully to escape to a life where your value is not diminished. You may be scared, but you can do it. There are shelters out there to help you where you can be strengthened and get on your feet. For those of you who have never experienced abuse, please know that 74% of Americans know or have known someone who was a victim of battered woman syndrome, a syndrome that happens to women of all different races, ages, religions, education levels, and income levels. Please find out the resources for them in your community. Thank you for hearing my story. I hope that it shines some perspective as we move into the module explaining the battered woman syndrome and the cycle of abuse. This is Joy McGee, encouraging you yourself to be encouraged and take the time to encourage others.